True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Guys, I've got my victory red on. I was so happy to see today that the assassin of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, is behind bars. Actually, he might not be behind bars because likely he is being interviewed by law enforcement. Now, while he may be a brilliant mind, he attended UPenn, he grew up in the private school system, very expensive, certainly extremely bright, highest GPA in his class, graduated valedictorian. I mean, the guy is a brilliant mind who unfortunately lost his way, and instead of using that mind for good, used that mind to commit murder. But I am just so grateful right now that he is behind bars. I think he was dangerous. I know I touched on this, I think, with possibly when I spoke with TMZ or perhaps in my tweets, that someone like this, just because it was targeted, could they be wanting to target others? I know personally, I reached out to actually the wife of a CEO of a huge corporation, bigger than United Healthcare. And I said, make sure those bodyguards are with him. And, they get very lax, a lot of these CEOs. And that's what happened in this case. Still find it interesting, but believe it was possible that he could have surveilled Brian Thompson. He was there 10 days. Now, remember, Brian Thompson showed up, is my understanding, on Monday before the conference. So in my mind, he would have had to surveil him clear from the airport and then keep watch on him to see what hotel he stayed at, and then keep watch on him to see what he did all during the day on Tuesday, that he made it back to his hotel Tuesday night, and that he then would have left in the morning for the conference in that early morning hour, well before the conference was supposed to start, obviously, to go there and prepare. I'm sure he was a speaker. All of us do that. You're going to make sure you have your laptop, your sound, everything's working. Going to get a cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee, but your water, whatever you're getting. So it made sense to me always that the CEO was prepared to go early, not right at the start of the conference. But that's a piece that will always bother me, is trying to understand how Luigi Maggiano knew exactly where Brian Thompson was going to be. Remember, he showed up on surveillance just minutes before the attack, hiding, secreting himself behind that Suburban. I have always said that behind that Suburban, that's exactly how anyone tactically trained. You don't want to be out in the open, the dark clothing. Everything he did was, quite frankly, really thought out. I always struggled with, why was he such a poor marksman? I think we know now. He was good enough to get the job done, but he was not a great marksman. What he was a great facilitator, a great planner, and he was steadfast in what he wanted to accomplish. I wanted to show you, for those of you who aren't on Twitter, the photograph of the gun used. Oh, shoot. Oh, here it is. Thought I put it up. This is a photograph of the gun used. What's interesting, I do everything on Twitter, X, from my phone. I do nothing on a computer. And so I need to start merging these pictures so I can just pull them up when I speak. But I think that's good enough so you can see what kind of gun it was. This isn't a veterinary gun that people said. This was a gun that, and I know you don't see the silencer on there, apparently that was not posted, but surely he used a silencer, homemade, put this gun together. And as we spoke about before on the other feed, the silencer was important to him. Here's his New Jersey ID that he used. I'm trying to get the glare to come off. And so you can see it seems like a very good ID. From the reports out there, let me just kind of go through that for people who don't know what I'm talking about. I should have headed it up. I was just so excited. A CEO last Wednesday of United Healthcare was gunned down in Manhattan in a very well thought out assassination real situation. The gunman came out, took a perfect stance, took a perfect grip. I'm sure he studied how to hold the gun. I'm sure he practiced, and he was able to hit the CEO. First shot in the calf, second shot in the back, which was the kill shot. It ended up killing Mr. Thompson. And then he actually later goes over. So after shooting 3 shots, which again, I said he's very well versed with his weapon because he knew that he was going to have to manually put a round into the chamber after each shot. So he shoots, racks, shoots, racks, shoots, racks. Then he has jamming. Now, I think these are true jams that he's trying to clear. He approaches right on top of Thompson. I mean, he's so close to him because Thompson, after he's shot in the calf, kind of, makes his way over to the right toward the wall. And then he's shot again in the back. He slumps against the wall. And then Luigi Mangione, the shooter, the assassin, makes his way closer. And I think he is trying to rack again to get more shots off. I believe even he points in that direction, but he doesn't. But we know he expels 3 cartridges. I want to explain really quick because some people don't understand. When they're talking about casings, I used to have a bullet around here. I don't right now. I put it up, but the casing holds the bullet. The bullet or projectile is what is expelled from that casing that would hit someone. When you're talking about the casing and the bullet, you call it a cartridge. I always just call things bullets and casings because to make it easier to understand. But I thought from now on we can talk in more vernacular regarding firearms. So they found 3 casings, meaning the bullets were out of them. Those are the 3 shots that are accounted for. 1 miss, 1 kill shot in the back, and 1 in the calf. And then the other shots are the cartridges, which are the bullet and the casings found. We know again that the words were written on them. I believe it was deny, defend, and depose. Of course, depose to me is the most interesting because a lot of people thought it meant legally, like to have a deposition and be deposed. I've always said, no, I think depose means to remove with force from a position. That's essentially the definition of to depose. So in a sense, he was sending that message, I think. And then, of course, the monopoly money, because United Health was charged with the conspiracy or was charged with being a monopoly, or not charged. They were looking into whether they were a monopoly or were not a monopoly. So I find this all very interesting. And I'm so glad they made an arrest. He was also apparently had 4 IDs on him. Now, for those of you waiting for Judge Erskine, she is coming on. I told her, hey, I wanted to just talk about the CEO shooting really quick before we spoke about the Daniel Penny case. But I want to do the lead into that. The Daniel Penny case that many of you may be here for is specifically the verdict came in today, and it was not guilty. But as many of you know, on Friday, the jurors kept coming back, and they said, listen, we can't reach consensus. We can't reach consensus on this. We have an issue with manslaughter, which was count 1. And so the judge, on the second time when they came back and said, we just can't reach a verdict, he said, all right, I'm throwing it out. Essentially, he said he wasn't throwing it out. And of course, a lot of lawyers that are experts that are talking about all this, I found that they, said a lot of interesting points. And that's why I wanted to get a judge up here, former judge, who also is an experienced appellate lawyer, to talk to us about the appellate implications of the judge throwing out the manslaughter charge. Now, he sent them back home and then said, come back on Monday to deliberate the remaining charge, which was the negligent homicide charge. So the manslaughter charge carried 15 years. The remaining charge of negligent homicide, only 4 years. So in any event, they deliberated for a very short time this morning and came back with not guilty. So Daniel Penny is a free man. And recall that Daniel Penny raised, last I checked, $3.2 million for his defense fund. Now, personally, if I were the prosecutor on this case, I would have been watching that fund and seeing the comments that were being made, not only there, but online. And while certainly, and again, I always want to give my condolences to the loved ones and family that knew Jordan Neely. I want to say that because no matter what, he is not with us any longer. And I do want to extend those condolences. So having said that, I think the jury got it right. I think the jury got it right based on law. Oh, Marianne, thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being a member for 6 months. I so appreciate you. I want to say that the jurors had to look at the law and marry in the facts. It's been disheartening that we haven't been able to see the facts, because in New York, jury trials are not streamed or made able on television for us to watch. So just like the trial in the Delphi case, it's been really frustrating. But I've tried to post some of the witness statements, some of the body-worn camera information on Twitter, so you all can have a look and see for yourself some of the sentiments at the time. Without further ado, our guest is here. And again, retired judge, appellate attorney, attorney extraordinaire, an amazing victims advocate who actually handled the adoption of Harmony Montgomery's brother, and who is a person who is a strong advocate of adoption as well. I'm adopted when I was 3 months old, given up at birth. And so I have a strong belief in the thought of adopting children that are unwanted. All right, we're going to go to the judge. I'm going to quit yapping and bring her up on stage. Uh-oh. Let's go with this. There she is. Hi, Judge Carol.
How are you?
Thank you for being here, Judge.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Judge, we were talking about the CEO case earlier. Just always wear red when law enforcement has a victory. And we have a big victory today because I think certainly other people could have been in jeopardy of being hurt by this individual because of their ideology. But we're having you on to discuss the Daniel Penny trial. Talk to us about your impression on Friday when you understood that the manslaughter charge would be summarily dismissed.
Yeah, I think everybody thought, well, this is a good thing, because they were making a determination that they were going to dismiss the manslaughter charge. But the problem with that was it was already clear that the jury was not going to make a finding, that the jury was hung. They had sent notices back to the judge asking questions about justification and re-instruction on justification. So it was clear that they were not buying, at least all of them, the prosecution's position that there was not justification, because that's really what it was about. I mean, the whole case was about, his defense was justification, and it was the prosecutor's responsibility to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not justification. And so when they dismissed the top charge, people were generally happy and wondered, why did the defense object to it? Well, the defense objected to it because the defense knew that they were about to declare a mistrial, because he had already given the Allen charge, and they were going to declare a mistrial. And of course, the defense knew that if he declared a mistrial on the top charge, he would have to declare a mistrial on the second charge, because both of those charges required justification. It was a justification defense. And so if you're going to find you're hung on this issue basically around justification, then the jury would have to be deadlocked on both, and they would have to declare a mistrial on both charges. So, and so that's why the defense wasn't happy and said, no, we want you to declare a mistrial. But the judge didn't do that. And the big issue that happened was, then the prosecutor said to the judge, why don't we just dismiss this top charge and let the jury go ahead on the second charge, because he knew they wouldn't be able to do that if there was a mistrial declared. And so it was viewed as a way of the judge and the prosecutor coercing the jury to basically come up with a guilty verdict, believing that they would say, well, the other one's dismissed, maybe we'll just go ahead and convict him on the second charge, which was negligence, not manslaughter. It was more like a criminal negligence. So that's why I was posting about the fact that I thought that this was a ploy that no one had ever seen before, with a judge, after the jury's out, saying, okay, now I'm just going to dismiss this case at the request of the prosecutor. And people criticized the judge, and everybody, I think all legal scholars, said this is going to be overturned on appeal if he's found guilty, because really it would have denied Penny due process by having the judge do that. So that's where it came in. It didn't work out for the prosecution, though, did it? Actually, it just did not work out for them.
Right. And I think you bring up such a good point about, this was a justification type case under the law. In other words, was he justified to take that action? And that, I think, is what the jury poured over and was having issue with. And I agree with you, Judge, even though at first blush, people who were supporting him not being convicted could say, yes, we just lost the big charge, without seeing that could divert the jury to say, all right, are we supposed to convict on the lesser charge?
Yeah, and absolutely, you stated it perfectly. That's exactly what happened. And the difficulty comes in with a judge who then re-instructs the jury when they came in the morning and said, okay, he sent them home saying the charge had been dismissed. And I was just amazed by this, because, of course, as you said, it's a justification defense. There were two issues, of course. There's causation, which was also an issue, because the defense had an expert witness that said it wasn't the chokehold that caused it. It was the contribution of being restricted, but he also had a sickle cell crisis, and there were other medical issues that contributed. So there was an issue of causation. But the main issue, I think, for everybody was, of course, justification, because you could tell by the notes that were sent. And so then after people criticizing the judge everywhere over the weekend, he comes in this morning, and I'll just read quickly what he said. He said, well, I want to make clear the court has no role at all in your deliberations. Like, right, I just dismissed the other charge, and now I'm telling you can go after this charge. It's not the court's business to talk about what directions your deliberations are taking. Certainly not the court's role to influence your deliberations. I'm just not buying that at all. That's improper, he said. By instructing you to go ahead to count 2, the court is not directing you toward any verdict. But of course, he kind of had to say that because there was so much criticism of him over the weekend saying he's going to be overturned. And so he's trying to sort of get himself out of trouble by saying this. But what I will say is it turned out well is that they go back in. They obviously had issues with justification. So justification was the same defense for count 2. And they couldn't find justification on count 1. So now they can't find it on 2. They bring back a not guilty verdict. And where is the prosecutor now? If the prosecutor and the judge didn't do this and dismiss the top charge, it would have been a mistrial on both charges, and Bragg could have brought him to trial again. But when he pulled this and decided to dismiss the top charge, and he's found guilty on the second charge of negligence, they can't retry him because it's double jeopardy for the case that they dismissed. So they lose completely. They not only do not get to retry him, but they, it was their error believing that they could coerce the jury into a verdict. This is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It is. I want to say that from, I think the layman perspective, perhaps, those jurors sitting there, you get instructed. I'm just going to break it down in an easy way. You get instructed that you got a bundle deal here, right? You got a bundle. If you find justification on one, you have it on the other. If you don't on one, you don't on the other. If you don't agree on one, you don't agree on both. It was a bundle. And he basically changed the game in the middle of the game and changed the rule. Instead of saying you need 2 runs to win, you only need 1. And, I'm just breaking it down how I see it. And I don't think that passed the jury what really happened here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it didn't pass the smell test, because now you have jurors who were instructed on 2 charges and they're going back into the jury room and saying, what happened? Why did that get dismissed? It seemed to have the opposite effect of them saying, well, I think this judge is telling us there was no justification. And the instructions for the negligence charge also would require that the prosecutor have to prove that there was no justification, which is why I think it didn't take that long. And you had a lot of many legal scholars and people, and even Alan Dershowitz saying they're going to come back with a not guilty because it's the same issue for the jury. They've had this issue of justification all along. That's where the issue was for them.
Judge, I want to ask your opinion on why you think this was even brought to trial. Why do you think that prosecutor took these facts and decided to charge him, and I think overcharge him?
Oh, I agree. It was completely overcharged. Well, I don't think he should have been charged at all. I mean, it was clear from the video that there was justification, and witness after witness testified that they felt in fear, that they thought they were going to die when Mr. Neely said someone's going to die today. So I think that, it was pretty clear that they knew that. I don't know, I think it became a political issue. You had a lot of people, again, looking at this, I think, from a race standpoint. Alan Dershowitz was interviewed yesterday, and he said, and I don't know if I agree with this or not, but he said that if Penny had been black and Neely had been white, he doesn't think that there would be a charge. He said this, came down for Bragg, like many things in Bragg's case, to identity politics. And that was his opinion, and that's the opinion of a lot of people. It's really hard to know what was in the mind of Bragg. I mean, you have this man who had mental health issues. He was schizophrenic and had all these issues. So I don't want to guess why he brought it, but he certainly has a reputation of bringing cases that, that seem to be somewhat maybe at times politically motivated or motivated by some type of identity politics. What his motive here is, I can't say. Those were the words of Alan Dershowitz, and of course he's a very respected former Harvard professor and a brilliant attorney. I don't think we'll ever know, but I think the jury sent a message saying, it's always going to boil down to facts. And, the fact that, this was even prosecuted was just absolutely stunning. And you've seen it before with Bragg, which the elderly gentleman who had the bodega and was defending himself during a robbery, and they immediately brought charges against the elderly gentleman. And then, of course, with so much political pressure, they finally dropped those charges. So I will say this, I don't think anywhere else in the United States outside of New York would there have been that charge. Or certainly there would not have been this manipulation, this attempt to, what people are saying was an attempt to coerce a verdict out of the jury, a verdict of guilty out of the jury. I mean, I think there are ethical violations by the judge. I think there are ethical violations by the prosecutor. That's for New York to decide. But I think at this point the jury got it right, and so we have to be happy about that.
I wanted to bring up something else that people might not know if they've never been charged with a crime like this, where your life is on the line. The emotional stress that Penny, that his family, that still many will hate Penny, whether he's been acquitted or not, have to go through when they are charged with a crime like this. Having to live kind of in seclusion, people know your face. Some people will say and have said, I've seen it all over, he's racist, he's a bigot, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've seen horrific things, obviously, on social media. But yes, he was acquitted, but he and his family have endured a lot. And I think that's why it's just so important for prosecutors to be very responsible with who they are choosing to prosecute.
Yeah, very well said. I think it's very, very frustrating when you think about his life. I mean, here he was. He served in the Marines. He was there protecting our way of life, free speech, whatever, protecting us in every way. You hope that people who enter the service will protect us. And then he comes back and does the same thing. He's protecting these people who are being threatened. Their lives are being threatened. And so you have to wonder, how this could lead to exactly what happened. His father afterwards gave a statement saying the process is rigged. I'm not clear exactly how it is that statement has truth, and it was a fair jury, and at times, I think people believed it was rigged against Penny because of this thing that the prosecutor did at the end by just pulling in a motion to dismiss after the trial evidence had closed. I mean, to me, that's just so improper and so inappropriate that it has the imprimatur of being rigged in a way that they were trying to coerce a guilty verdict. A lot of people have said that, but it didn't work. But yeah, I think his life, it's so unfair. His life changed. The dad of Neely's life changed, and you have to ask the question: what was New York doing for this? For Mr. Neely, what treatment was he getting? Was he getting medication? Was he getting mental health treatment? What brought him to the subway that day in this chaotic environment, in this very enraged kind of environment, telling people someone's going to die today? What brought him to that point? Because, if there's any indictment here, the indictment should be against New York's inability to treat the people that have mental illness and that need the kind of services and shelter to keep them safe and to keep other people safe. To me, that's where the indictment should fall.
Bravo. I mean, exactly. I also, as you probably know, he was taking something just for educational purposes. It was a synthetic marijuana.
K2, yeah.
And this is not, sit back and let the stars go by high. This has the effect of like a cocaine on steroids and on many people. And I think it had it on Mr. Neely. And also, I think it's important to denote, he had issues for a very long time. This wasn't just something that arose. Living on the streets, as you said, what is our way forward to dealing with people with addiction, mental health, and other violent tendencies that are on the streets right now? We need answers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think one of the saddest things about even here in Massachusetts, when I left the bench, there was an 8-month wait for children to get services and therapy. And that's just to get a therapist, not necessarily a psychiatrist or a medication. We couldn't get kids into residential care. I mean, it was, and hopefully things will change in the new administration as they start cutting out programs that are not effective, and hopefully bringing money back into the social services area. But this is one thing I talk about even in Harmony's case in the book, is the fact that legislators don't really have a lot of interest in providing funding for this type of care. A lot of, especially with children, they don't vote. A lot of people that have mental health issues are just not getting the services they need, and lawmakers don't seem to really care about it. And it's just not at the top of their agenda. And so it is, as you point out, we have to address this issue. When I was on the bench, we couldn't even get, people had to have drug testing if they had substance use issues, but there was no money. The Department of Children and Families, the Department of Mental Health, DDS, all those agencies were like, we don't have any money. So they would require these people to get substance testing. And yet these people were indigent. They were represented by lawyers, because of their indigency. So it's a forgotten group. And, you look at Mr. Neely and you just wonder, what did anybody do for him? I'm sure his dad was frustrated too at the lack of help for his son. And, even parents, it really is a national disaster. I'm hoping things will change with the new administration. I don't know, but let's hope so.
Let's hope so. I had posted, I don't know if you saw this post about recently $1 billion being sent to Africa to help with the
Mhm.
people that were suffering drought and so forth. And believe me, I think it is a wonderful thing to give to other countries. But gosh, we have so much wrong here. Can't we take care of our own first, our veterans without houses? How about all the people in North Carolina in sub-freezing temperatures right now that are homeless after Helene,
Oh,
and all the issues we're talking about right now with homelessness? Why in the world can't we fix home? I'm like Teddy Roosevelt. Let's fix home, and
mhm.
and then share, and then show our generosity. It's Africa.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's, yeah, you said it perfectly. Why can't we fix this? And we should be able to fix it, and we should at least be able to start with services. Because if you have people like Mr. Neely in New York, that are escalating, schizophrenic, and I don't know if he had paranoia with his schizophrenic, maybe he was in a psychotic state, maybe he was forwardly psychotic at the time. You don't know, but what you do know is he obviously wasn't in a state where it seems like he was being treated effectively. And I think that that's really just the whole sad aspect to this, there are these people that are out there. And if you're in that subway and you're sitting there and someone's saying, one of you is going to die today, you have no idea whether that person's going to carry through with it. He seems out of control. He seems chaotic. And I think the jury in that case probably understood that there were mental health issues, but also understood that people were in fear. I mean, people want to criticize Penny, but they're not the people that were sitting there. They're not the people that thought their lives were going to end that day, because that's what he said. Someone's life is going to end. Someone's going to die today. I mean, you have to put yourself in their situation. And I think that's what the jury did. I think the jury heard these people saying, I thought I was going to die that day. And so you can look at all the factors: substance use, he was using K2, which also probably maybe even could have made his paranoia and his schizophrenic. It could have exacerbated it. I mean, there are so many factors. But, I hope that New York will actually start looking at the kind of care these people need so that you're not putting people at risk. And you certainly hope that Daniel Penny can move on. The father's filed a civil action against him. I'm not sure that will go anywhere for the same reason. And then that he can go on with his life. So he's got a lot of support. He's got support in the new administration. He's got support from a lot of people around the United States. So hopefully he'll be able to move on. And, hopefully Mr. Neely's dad will be able to find some peace. But it's a sad situation all around.
I'm glad you brought that up because there is a civil suit, a wrongful death suit that's been filed by the father,
Yep.
Jordan Neely, against Daniel Penny. He still, thankfully, has a defense fund, and he will get top-notch lawyers that will defend him. But it's not over. This could drag on for a year. It could drag on for 2 years.
Yeah.
We don't know what we'll see. But unfortunately, it hasn't ended.
Yeah. And what does he do in the meantime? But he has a lot of support. So, and hopefully he'll get more support from the veterans and the Veterans Association. And, he's a kid. He's 26 years old. So 2 26-year-olds today. This boy, this 26-year-old, and then the other one.
Yeah. Before we sign off, I would love to get your thoughts about Luigi Maggioni. I think I'm pronouncing his last name correct. UPenn attendee who graduated valedictorian from his prestigious class. I listened to his speech, his valedictorian speech, before coming on, and he talked about such interesting things. He was certainly a man of ideas, but you can't just have ideas. You need action. You need to take action on your ideas. He just had some philosophical things that he said that I thought were interesting. I thought it was interesting how he ended that there are times for goodbyes.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's convicted, it's going to be a big goodbye. But I think law enforcement has done a great job gathering the
amazing
and people were upset because it took a while. They have to do it perfectly. They have to get search warrants. They can't just seize information about this or that or his movement in Greyhound and the GPS from the thing. It's a judicial process, it's a production process, and then it's an investigative process. But
yeah,
give us your thoughts.
We live in this world where people, watch Law and Order, and the same day, they find the perpetrator, and all the evidence is just right there, and then there's a trial. But of course, it's not like that in real life. The fact that they were able to make an arrest within a week is stunningly fast. It's amazing. But we live in a world where people just want immediate gratification. It's like, why haven't you found this? Well, it's a big country, and it's easy to disappear. And, I know people were saying to me, oh, they're not going to find this guy. I'm like, are you kidding me? The FBI and the police, they're going to nab this guy within 3 or 4 days. And I was right about that, But what is interesting to me is here you have a 26-year-old who thinks he's, who's very smart, who goes to a $40,000 a year high school, comes from a pampered, wealthy, sounds like very wealthy background, where he's had everything. He gets into Ivy League school, he gets into UPenn, and he's the tech genius, and he's the AI genius, and then gets a master's degree in computer technology and engineering, and he's this genius. My feeling about that, I mean, we don't really know much about him, but my feeling about that is, there's this sort of sense of arrogance, like I can pull this off because I'm so smart, and people have been telling me how smart I am, and I can pull this off and not get caught. And it's really interesting when you have people who have no law enforcement experience, but in this world of academia where everyone tells you how smart you are and that you're smarter than everyone else, and maybe you start to believe that, right? And he's thinking maybe I'm smarter than everyone else. I think everybody thought, oh, he must have had a terrible experience. Maybe someone was dying and didn't get treatment, but that's not the case. I mean, there was some evidence that his grandmother died in 2017 and his grandfather died before that, and he was angry at the medical community. But I don't think he was sitting there for 7 years saying, these insurers, it seems like it was more of, I need to send a message because I'm angry at the medical community, and this is how I'm going to send that message. That's what it seems like to me. It's very early to know, but I'm not getting the impression that there was something that was denied, and maybe that'll come out later. And even if that's the case, anybody that says anything to support, a brutal murder of a man who has a wife and children is depraved and sick and should really take a look at their life. So, but I just think he seems like, an Ivy League kid. He sort of had some things on I looked at his Twitter. He just said some things about climate change, but there's not a lot out there on Twitter about medical care. And he, as you pointed out, he had a bunch of philosophies that he would talk about. So you don't know why he honed in on this, but his life is over. I think if he's convicted, can you imagine this kid that went to Ivy League with all these people telling him how brilliant he was, because apparently he's quite brilliant, and going to this posh high school, and now in Rikers, eventually there's going to have to be they're going to have to bring him back to New York. So that's going to happen first.
Well, I always said the deny, defend, depose, and then the monopoly money was more about him than anything. In other words, yes, he wanted to send this message, but it's more, see how great I am, see how I can toy with you all, see how wonderful I am. Mm-hmm. That's what that means, in my view, from my experience, when people taunt. That's what it's really about, them more than their message. And
I think as you're a former FBI agent, I think that's a good way to put it, that you sort of have the sense of, when you're looking at suspects, what's their motive. And I think as you look at the motive that way, I think it makes sense, especially coming from someone who has a history of bringing suspects to justice. I think you have the experience to looking at motives. And it just, I think what you're saying just makes a lot of sense.
And the fantasy piece, right? I think he thought he would be able to get away with it. He had everything well planned out, totally underestimating how law enforcement works, and that they would release his photos the minute they had them. A lot of people, the mayor kind of intimated that they knew who he was. The minute I saw after he said that, they threw out 2 pictures of the guy. I'm like, they don't know who he is. Mm-hmm. Who he was, just like in the Bryan Kohberger case, you wouldn't see Bryan Kohberger's picture all over the place. They're going to nab him first, and then you're going to see Bryan Kohberger. But that was in the inverse order in this. And so I think most of us knew there's no way law enforcement right now had him ID'd. Yeah. And it was wonderful. And this is why, and I know many people were doing this, I was just flooding, my platform with his face. Social media, all the platforms have been doing that, and so is mainstream media, and that's why he was caught. Somebody saw something on a show and said, "Wow, I think this could be the guy."
Yep. And good old-fashioned tip, right?
Yeah.
Good old-fashioned tip is what it boils down to. Not any of his AI stuff, not any of his technology. Good old-fashioned tip coming from the news or the media or social media. And that's as you compare it to the Kohberger case, there are similarities there. Again, you have someone now who's alleged to have killed these young 4 students, who, seems like was a person that, I can get away with this. I can do this. I'm smarter than people. And he had the criminal justice background. This young person charged in the CEO's death doesn't have that background. And, maybe it's a statement about, just because you're smart and you did well academically and people tell you how smart you are and you have all these technological advantages, maybe some good old-fashioned police work, just and tip lines, is what's going to put you in jail possibly forever. So yeah, very interesting. Interesting to hear your perspective as well.
It'll be interesting to see if he talks.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to be like a Ted Kaczynski?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this the new generation? I mean, this guy, unlike Ted Kaczynski, and I think they're alike in a lot of ways, this guy seems more personable. You know, I've been calling him the flirty assassin, and people say, oh, don't give him a cute name. I'm not giving him a cute name. I'm trying to denote that it was his flirty action, pulling that down, giving that smile that led to his arrest. And actually, they said that in the press conference, that it was that picture, the hostile picture, that led to his arrest. So it's you know, they make mistakes. All crooks make mistakes. I always say that's why law enforcement has a job.
Yeah, and they do make mistakes, and that's exactly what happened. He made a lot of mistakes, you know, because maybe he just wasn't as smart as he thought he was. So it'll be really interesting over the next few days. But interesting that there are two 26-year-olds today. You know, Daniel Penny, who did nothing but protect people in the military on his deployments, and then while Daniel Penny was doing that, this kid was sort of being pampered at University of Pennsylvania, hailed for his high level of intelligence, and now accused of a cold-blooded, lying-in-wait murder. It's unbelievable, the dichotomy that you're seeing today. Just unbelievable. Right now, he's arrested. He's innocent until proven guilty. But it's a really interesting dichotomy between these two 26-year-olds.
Well, perfectly said. I can't think of a better way to end it, except for today, I think justice has been served. At least begun in one case, but
it's a good day.
It's been served. It's a good day for law enforcement. Judge, thank you for being such a friend of the program. Thank you for coming on. I so appreciate your time and your experience, your academic background, everything about you. Thank you.
Well, thanks as always for having me on, Jennifer. I love listening to your perspective. It's just really interesting from the law enforcement perspective. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the future, I hope.
All right, all the best. I'm sure we will. Everyone, the judge is so amazing. I mean, she just has a viewpoint from a legal background and legal perspective, and somebody who's practiced. She's done the job. She's done multiple jobs in that arena. And I always just love to have somebody like that on this program that gives us this vantage point, this lens. So I think it's just so important. I want to really quick see if there's any questions or comments. I want to thank all my mods, by the way. You all are so amazing at making sure everything stays pure and clean. Right now, it looks like everybody is just saying, hi, good job, blah, blah, blah. So thank you all. Thank you, everybody who took the time today to join us. And until next time, may justice be served.